you've got a basic theme for your project, but there are lots of other things you need to consider before you can create your design brief. This is where Access FM comes into play again. So aesthetics, thinking about the way your project could look. Now we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail in a moment. But it's more than just the theme. We also need to consider our customer. What type of person are we making for? This is going to have a huge impact on what the end product will look like. And it's important at this stage of the process on your mind map, you're considering lots of different options. Don't make any decisions just yet. The cost, you could be specific about this. How much are you willing to spend on the materials? How are you going to consider environmental factors when you're designing your product? For example, is it going to be recyclable or made from repairable components? Safety needs to be considered with all products, so there's different tests you can undertake to ensure that your product is safe. Size, you could be quite specific with measurements in millimetres here. And then the function, what is your product actually designed to do? Finally, materials. Now we've explored the use of polymer clay, but actually there's loads of different materials you might want to explore and experiment with. Once you've got your initial mind map with loads of different ideas, you then want to select and highlight the ones that really stand out to you and the decisions that you think you've already made about how your product might end up. From that, you can then create a list of must-haves and could-haves. So you're making decisions on things that you think absolutely must be part of your product, and then other aspects which you'd like to be perhaps part of your product, but you don't need to be set in stone at this stage. This gives you a really good starting point for your design brief. So let's look at aesthetics a little bit more in detail. So we've got our theme, I've chosen the fantasy theme, but from that there's lots of different strands I could explore. For example, I could focus just on fairies or Greek mythology, or look at films and books such as Harry Potter where they use lots of mythical creatures. There's also other aspects you consider, for example, how you might use colour. You might have a certain colour palette or options in mind. Or what's the actual overall style of the product going to be? For example, is it going to be very traditional and old-fashioned, or quite modern and trendy? What's the function of your product? Well, we know that jewellery is generally a decorative item, but it can have other functions. For example, a locket holds a photo, or some jewellery holds medical information or contact details. There are other functions that jewellery can have beyond just looking nice. It might be to promote a film. It might be considered merchandise, for example, so its function is not only to be decorative, but also to promote the film. What other ways can you think of as alternative functions for jewellery? Maybe you can think of a completely new idea. And then materials. I've highlighted polymer because this is the material we've explored in detail, but I also wanted to start exploring with resin. Maybe you've got some other suggestions or ideas or materials that you want to experiment with further. If you do want to explore other materials, you may well need to complete extra research by experimenting and exploring the properties of the materials, but there will be opportunity to do this throughout your final project, so don't be put off by the idea of trying something new just because we haven't explored that material just yet. So the must-haves. Now, you've already decided on a theme, so your must-have must stick to that theme. But actually anything else can be changed. It doesn't have to be in the must-haves. So I want it to be decorative, and I want it to include polymer clay. For me personally, that's going to be must-haves. Your list can look very different to this. The only thing that will be the same is the theme that you have chosen. You should stick with that throughout the rest of the project. The could-haves are the ideas that you are wanting to explore, but don't necessarily have to be set in stone. So although my theme is fantasy and mythical creatures, I could base it around the fairies. However, as I go on to do further research, I might want to change this and look at a different mythical creature, and that's fine to do. You should now complete your own things to consider mind map. Consider all of the Access FM headings and try to give as many options as possible. Even if you know that you're likely to rule them out later on, it's good to have the choice in front of you. So try to include as many suggestions as possible within the different Access FM headings. Once you've done that, complete a list of must-haves and could-haves, as this is going to help you massively when it comes to your next task of creating a design brief.